And you may have noticed that I skipped over Dr. Roger Levin during the panel, and that's because he is our main speaker today. And there's nothing more enjoyable than introducing somebody that you really like and admire. And that's what I get to do right now. Dr. Roger Levin is an internationally recognized management consultant and dental business visionary. He's the author of 68 books and more than 4,000 articles. He's a regular contributor to JADA, Dental Economics, Inside Dentistry, and Chairside Magazine. Levin Group, the company he founded back in 1982, evolved from his vision and has helped tens of thousands of dentists. Dr. Levin is deeply committed to creating practice success for every dentist. I have to tell you, when I started this webinar exactly 4 years ago, in those early stages of the COVID pandemic, the first person I called was Roger, and he has been the backbone of this program ever since. So I am proud to turn this over to you, Dr. Roger Levin.
Well, thank you. It's a great honor to be presenting this on the 4th anniversary, but it's the whole panel, and it's been absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to share my slides. Give me one moment. And I think today could be very helpful to many, many doctors out there. And if we could go back, and we can't, but we could all go back to our first day in practice, I would say, and this is what I tell young dentists, there are only two things you need to know. How old do you want to be when you retire, and how much money will you need? And when you first come into practice, of course, that's a ridiculous thought. And now with student loan debt, you're more worried about paying that off. So my presentation today is going to be about a proven pathway for wealth accumulation for dentists. For 39 years, I've had the privilege of working with dentists, meeting dentists, working with our consultants, and learning what works and what doesn't. And if I can help anyone watching this presentation to reach financial independence. This really isn't about retirement. You can retire whenever you want. It's really about reaching financial independence. And by the way, you will never have more fun in practice than the day you're financially independent. So I'm going to take you through a series of concepts and pathways. If you follow it, I guarantee you, you will have a wonderful career. You will reach financial independence. And I'm going to explain to you why it's more important now to think that way than ever before. So we have a disclaimer here. I'm not going to read it to you, but anything I say today, because I'm not giving specific investment advice, but if you take some investment advice from this, check it with your own experts as well. Now, the fun disclaimer is there are exceptions to everything that I'm about to teach you, and you are probably not the exception. We all think we're the exception. We can do it differently and we'll be fine. There are very few exceptions actually in life, but certainly in regard to the presentation I'm about to make. And this is for dentists. Not that I'd be giving this in any other field. I've only worked in dentistry my whole life. But if I was speaking to hedge fund owners or private equity people, I would give a very different presentation, because we have to start with what is the opportunity as a dentist to accumulate wealth? And that's a very specific question and a very specific answer. And I want all of you to be successful and protected throughout your careers. So I always start with a question in anything I do. And the question is, what is a wealthy dentist? And the answer is every industry has a specific wealth accumulation potential. There are dentists who do phenomenally well. There are dentists that are moderate. There are dentists, unfortunately, that don't do well. And if you wanted to have Ferraris in every color in your many, many garages and 2 or 3 houses on the French Riviera, you shouldn't have become a dentist, because every industry gives you a general guideline, with those very few exceptions, as to how much wealth you can accumulate. Now, here's the good news. Dentists can do very, very well. We can have incredible lives. We can take time off to go see our kids' sporting events. We can work when we want. We control our practices unless we're employed dentists. And even then, we may be 4 days a week, not 5. But for dentists, accumulating wealth is in the low millions, whether that's 4 million, 8 million, 10 million, 1 million. That's all in the ranges. But how many of those low millions you will accumulate is up to you and what I'm going to call the process. And the process I'm going to show you will make you financially successful, somewhere between good and great, if you have enough time. Now, the older we get, the less time we have to implement all of these strategies and get the long-term ROI, return on investment. So what is wealth? What is wealth, and how do we accumulate it? My philosophy for dentists is, and this is, again, these are my perspectives, 39 years, tens of thousands of clients that I want to share with you, get rich slowly. It's not some angle. It's a belief I have that most dentists, the vast majority, will do best if they get rich slowly. But what happens? Well, we hear about a wealthy person, and then all of a sudden we want to be wealthy overnight. Get rich slowly is my advice. Why? Because the retirement age of a dentist today is about 69 years of age. Levin Group has data that it might be 71, but here's what I know. I'm willing to bet that in the next 5 to 7 years, the average retirement age of a dentist will be 73 to 75 years of age. So I have a joke that's not so funny. If your goal is to die chairside, you might just achieve that goal. Well, I would like every dentist to be targeting financial independence by the age of 62. Now, there are three ways you can get there. The light blue line on the bottom is, you see that the practice in year 0 takes off. It grows as practices do. Then it stays pretty flat, might get a little more growth at the end. And you're only, and if you look at the height of 1, 2, and 3, that represents the amount of savings you have for retirement. And savings will determine financial independence. Number 1 is not where I want you to be. You're going to work longer. You might be 70, 71, 74, 75, not because you want to be, but because you have to be. Now, line number 2, the darker blue, is the most common. Practice takes off, and then it grows nicely and gradually, as you can see here, throughout your career. And this is a dentist who's going to be financially independent, 67, 68, 69 years of age, unless something goes wrong, which is my last section today. Where I want you, the dark blue line is not so bad. That's a pretty good career. But if I have a choice, I want you in the green. And I pick green for money. This isn't about greed. This is about having the career you deserve and the financial return that you deserve from all the hard work you do and all the people that we've helped as dentists. In the green, the practice takes off on a big jump. Now, it shows here year 0. This would be a startup or something you bought, but you can make this jump anytime. Wherever you are today, you are 30% to 50% lower in production than you could be, again, with rare exceptions. And I know your first thought is, no, Roger, maybe that's true, but not for me. I am so busy. Remember these words. Busyness is not productivity. Busy is not production. You can make this jump at any point to a higher level and then grow steadily. And as the graph shows, the green line and being number 3 is going to get you to financial independence much faster. So here are the wealth accumulation realities for dentists. And my advice is pay a lot of attention to this. And then you can decide if you like what I'm saying or not, but pay a lot of attention. Risk equals return. I have found that to be incredibly true. If you want to take great risk, you can make the jump bigger. You might be wealthier than 99% of dentists, or you might go bankrupt. Yesterday, I was reading about it. A business person who has bankrupted almost everything he has touched over the course of his career. Not sure how he keeps getting money, but that's not what we want to do as dentists. No dentist wants to go bankrupt or have a poor performing practice, or a good performing practice, but a major setback in your financial life, which I'm going to cover. But here's one of the big dangers. We hear about the overnight zillionaire. We pick up the Wall Street Journal. We got this 21-year-old kid who's now worth $5 billion, just got bought out by Microsoft or Intel or Apple or Google, and we get jealous. We hear about successful dentists and we get jealous. This is a danger zone, because when we hear about that, we think we can do it. And dentists are smart. Dentists are very smart people, high IQ, and smart people often think they can do what someone else has done. So we hear about this overnight sensation dentist, and we want to be one of them. Well, let me warn you, big warning here. As a dentist, I get the same marketing solicitations that you get. I get the same ones that tell me that I can triple my practice in 30 days if I just sign up for this dentist program or teaching or whatever it is. Half of those stories might be true, and half of them are not. I have met dentists where they marketed certain things, and then when I met them, they had serious problems. They came to Levin Group, and what was marketed was not really what was happening. We don't hear about the big losses. We only see the big wins. So don't assume just because someone tells you it can be done or that they did it, you need to really verify that. And even then, risk equals return. Instead, I'm going to give you the proven pathway in just a few minutes. Now, the next thing to know, most dentists don't come from very wealthy families, not necessarily poor families, but most of the dentists on here listening to me today do not have a trust fund. In fact, probably only one or two or three of you do. And the offspring of the wealthy typically don't become dentists. I've been fascinated by this my whole career. I've asked endless audiences how many doctors in the audience are the highest income earner and the highest educated in the history of their families, not including their siblings, and hands skyrocket. The offspring of very wealthy families typically don't go into dentistry. They go in the family business, they become attorneys, they launch their own business. So you are the first generation of this level of income, which is great, but you don't have parents, for most dentists, that are paying for dental school or wouldn't have the amount of student loan debt we have. Some of you did win the lottery like I did, and your parents paid for dental school. And I went to a state school that was so inexpensive. It was incredible. Today, it's not nearly as inexpensive. And we'll get to student loan debt in a second. So you probably have debt. You have debt from a student loans. You have debt on your practice. You have debt on your house, maybe even debt on your cars. Debt is the opposite of wealth accumulation. The more debt you have, the less wealth accumulation. Take whatever your savings is and subtract the amount of debt that you have. And student loan debt, which is new to the new generations, really adds up quickly with interest. I write the word yuck. My personal feelings about student loan debt is that they are very, very debilitating. And I want to get dentists out of this kind of debt, not quickly, as I'll explain in a moment, but definitively. Because you've got the student loan debt, and then if you want to own a practice, then you layer on practice debt. Now, having said that, being in private practice is still a fantastic opportunity. I'm not anti-corporate. I'm not anti-DSO. I'm not anti-anything. I deal with the day-to-day realities of each of our clients, but we've got to have a plan to deal with debt if we're going to accumulate wealth. But you don't necessarily have to pay it off too quickly. And MK can address this later in the panel's going to come back and make comments. You pay off debt strategically. If you have a loan from before the pandemic at 1.5%, I wouldn't pay that off right now. I'd be getting you can get a guaranteed 4 to 5% from treasury bonds, and that's the safest investment in the country. So I'm not giving investment advice. What I'm saying is make sure you work with professionals in regard to any decisions in regard to paying off your debt. But I'll tell you another strategic decision: living beyond your means. And I meet lots of dentists. If you're doing it, you're normal, but it's still not a good idea. I meet lots of dentists that are spending much more money early in their lives, and they're going to play catch up along the way. Now, the next thing I advise every dentist is get a financial plan. Call MK, call somebody as early as you can. Don't say, oh, I've only got debt, I don't need a financial plan. Yes, you do. But I've got one comment for the many fantastic financial planners that are out there, and there are many excellent people, but I've got a comment, which is they cannot give you an accurate financial plan. Why? Because they're not smart, because they're not experienced? No. You can take the best financial planners in the country, and I will debate and win that they cannot give you an accurate financial plan for the future. Why? Because nobody knows the future. Financial plans are based today. How many financial planners predicted COVID? Many of you have financial planners. How many predicted COVID was coming? How many predicted the level of inflation we had last year? In fact, most financial planners were predicting we were going to have a recession. And I'm talking about the geniuses, and they are geniuses from Wall Street. We didn't have a recession. How many can tell you when the next recession's coming? I've predicted 20 of the last 4 recessions. Think about that. Future interest rates, what are they going to be? We have no idea. When is technology that's driving the stock market up? I love the stock market right now. Who wouldn't? When is tech going to slow down? And in 1999, it crashed, killed tons of businesses and portfolios. When is a war going to break out? Well, just look around the world as it is today. And that does have an effect. So in the wealth accumulation realities for dentists, you want to get a financial plan, get that done, set your pathway to achieve that plan. How much do I have to put away? I'm going to get into all that. And then my suggestion, you don't hear this from most financial planners, add 20% to whatever you're told. If you are 20% ahead of today's financial plan, the odds are, short of a depression that I hope we never have, you are going to be in good shape. That's the buffer to protect yourself. It could go the other way. We could have the greatest economy for the next 20 years, but I can't bank on that, and I want to protect you. Next, wealth accumulation for dentists. You've got to decide, do you want to be an owner or an employee? And I'll go into the DSO decision and selling and working for them in a few minutes. Again, I'm not taking any sides. These are choices. But if you don't have a practice, you don't have an asset to sell later. So just straight fact, if you don't own a practice, you're losing out on a serious asset opportunity. And as MK will tell you, small businesses also have tax benefits that you cannot take advantage of when you are an employee. Now, these are just facts, not shooting in any direction. But here's what I absolutely have seen. You can shave 10 years off the time it will take you to reach financial independence, still have a great lifestyle if you do things properly. If you buy 3 high-end Porsches as soon as you graduate, and then you get a house 2 years later that's gigantic, you will spend a lot of time playing catch up. So this is not a philosophical live this way or that way. Money is money, and there's only so much of it if we are dentists for 99%. So there are 3 steps to accumulating wealth. This is what you all really want to know about. Here we go. 1, increase your practice income every year. I've never seen a practice where production did not rise every year that wasn't healthy. That practice is somewhere between good and great. You don't have to have giant jumps. If production goes up every year, because as you'll see on my next slide, you have great systems, you will be fine. You may not be the wealthiest dentist in the country, but I guarantee you, you will be fine. Number 2, save the targeted amount. Don't just save when you can, what's left over after you pay your bills, whatever you feel like putting away. You need a plan. People with plans perform better, because even when the plan goes wrong, people can then adjust more quickly. And number 3, my last section later, avoid NLEs, negative life events, all of which I will explain. So here we go. Most practices, I can now show you this mathematically with documentation, will lose between $15 million and $20 million of revenue in a 40-year career. Example, no-shows, which includes last-minute cancels alone, are going to cost you $3 million to $6 million. This isn't even about new patients. This is about patients who had appointments that did not show up. $3 million to $6 million. You don't notice it because it happens here, 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 and here. Once in a while, you get a no-show. You're like, oh, great, I'll go sit in my office for a few minutes or an hour, and you like it. But all of this added up, all of the inefficiencies are going to cost you $15 million to $20 million. I've spent the last 3 years looking at what we are losing, and we don't realize it. This is now mathematically proven fact. What will accommodate this is having systems. Systems are the key to a successful practice. They have to be detailed and defined. And yes, there is some work, Every 3 years, your systems now need to be updated. Our world's changing too fast. For example, look at the staffing crisis. I could spend the next 3 hours just on that. I gave a webinar on that this week already, just training the team to a higher level. I don't know that this is true, but I remember a statistic I once read in Harvard Business Review that for every dollar you spend on training, you get $3 back. I don't know that that's true, but I guarantee you get more back than whatever you are spending. Okay, part 2, saving the targeted amount. Set a goal for savings. Every month, week, or whatever cycle's going to be, that check gets written. It can be electronic, but I like that phrase. Become a fanatic about your savings. And if you can do the next thing, you've got this, no problem, and you will be a wealthy dentist. Try not to touch principal. Once you put it away, leave it there. Everything that comes in, we reinvest it and reinvest it. And I'm going to show you the returns you need in just a couple minutes. But get your financial advice early. And by the way, not everybody's good at financial advice. There's some people who are great at certain things. You want someone that can really give you the guidance to get where you want to go. So you don't need the greatest financial planner in the country, but you also don't want someone who doesn't really understand it or just spits out a 7-page standardized plan out of a piece of software where they did almost no work. That's not going to get you there. So here are financial concepts to live by. Number 1, work with big institutions. They've got the research, they've got the data, they have the information, or people who at least have access to that. Number 2, I would think that, Gary's an attorney on our panel, MK's a CPA. I would be shocked if they didn't agree with this next statement. Don't write your savings checks to a person. Write it to an institution. Embezzlement is big, much bigger than you realize, and that can set you back 5, 10, even 20 years. So when you write your check to a big institution, and a lot of smaller financial investment firms, the money goes through big institutions. You want to check on that. If anything goes wrong illegally, you do not lose your money. Here are 3 experiences I've had in recent years. I got a call from a female doctor. Her entire life savings of $500,000 evaporated when the cryptocurrency she was in disappeared. Now, I'm not anti-cryptocurrency. I don't have any. I'm not telling you to get it or not get it. That's not what today is about. But oddly enough, yesterday, Sam Bankman-Fried, who had a company called FTX, worth $30 to $40 billion. Most of that money has disappeared. Little bits of it are being paid back. And he just got sentenced to 25 years in jail. So just know there are different kinds of risk. We're dentists. Losing $500,000 at her age was a very, very serious situation. And of course, we're getting a call because she needs to make it up as quickly as possible. Once again, we are dentists. You can't make up that $500,000 in savings for her quick. You can make it up in time, but not quickly. Number 2, got another call from a dentist. His friend had an incredible entrepreneurial idea. This dentist invested all of his savings into his friend's new company, and it went bankrupt. And I've heard that many times in my career. So again, do you invest all your savings? I wouldn't invest all my savings in anything. I don't care how good it looks. Work with your financial planners. And then the third dentist, he had his own Bernie Madoff. It wasn't Bernie Madoff. If anybody doesn't know who Bernie Madoff is, he ran what was then the largest Ponzi scam in history, where basically total fraud. The company did not have the money it was supposed to have. Eventually, he got into financial trouble. People lost their money. And it cost this dentist $3.2 million. He thought he was safe and saving. He did everything else right, except he lost $3.2 million that he is not getting back. So, no, as a dentist, we're dentists. We're not hedge fund managers. We're not private equity firm owners. If they do well, we're dentists. We can't make up big losses overnight. So the next suggestion I have is work with fee-based investment advisors, people who take a percentage rather than get paid every time they trade your stocks or bonds. And remember, everybody wants to sell you something. There are people who want to sell you stocks, bonds, gold, annuities, cryptocurrency, NFTs, or pirate treasure. Everybody's out there to sell you something. You need people that have your best interest in mind. Here's one of those people. Her name is Mary Callahan Erdos, born in 1967. She's the chief executive officer of JP Morgan, one of the largest banks in the world, big institution, asset and wealth management. She's a global leader in investment management and private banking, and she oversees a division that has $4 trillion in client assets. And she's also one of the longest standing members of JP Morgan Chase's operating committee. And Jamie Dimon, if you follow financial news, is the CEO, incredibly respected. Here's why I gave you all that. I was at a conference where Mary was speaking, and she got a question. And these were the four reasons her answer to this question. She had four parts. What was the question? Why do wealthy people lose money? Well, we could say, why do dentists lose money? Here's the answer. Her answer. Number one, most wealthy people make their money in their businesses. We are dentists. I have a consulting firm. We make our living in the work we do. That's what we're really good at, smart at, experienced at. But then wealthy people who do well in their businesses think they can also be great investors. We see other dentists, we hear stories, half of which aren't true. And when they lose their money, they double down to get it back. So we start trying to invest on our own. It doesn't go well. We lose money. Then we want it back. So we take even more risk. And well-to-do people also want outlandish returns. The reason I mention outlandish, we all want outlandish returns, of course. But what Mary said, and I love this statement, and I like this statement for dentists, not for everybody, but for us, 5% returns for 20 years isn't so bad. If you just plod along at 5%, 5%, 5%, I actually think the tortoise won the race. 5% every year in a practice that has production going up every year, you're going to be fine. And based on the wealth you could accumulate, you can't afford huge losses. And now I'm going to talk about this because I believe it is so important. This is my warning to you. I'm not trying to scare you. I don't do scary stuff. I really care about helping every dentist do well, but protect them at the same time. And those are the two parts of what I want to do in my career: help dentists be very successful and protect their futures. So there's a term I came up with: negative life events. It will hurt wealth accumulation. And read the last line again on my previous slide. Based on being a dentist, you can't afford big losses. I've met so many dentists set back 10 to 15 years. Never want that to happen to you. Now, it might happen to you because life has certain parts we can't control. This is Jim Collins, probably the smartest business mind alive today. I'm a very, very deep student of Jim's. I admire him. In business, I admire him as number one. But Jim has a statement. The only thing I think he's ever said that I don't fully agree with, and he's a lot smarter than I am, but he said, the only mistakes you can't come back from are the ones that kill you. I don't agree with that, because there are mistakes you can make, like negative life events, that can really, really, really hurt you. You might not be killed, but you are really wounded. And I never want this to happen if you can avoid it. Because NLEs, that's the term I'm going to use for negative life event, can undermine you and your wealth accumulation. They can hurt you physically, emotionally, mentally, financially. And when you have an NLE, you just bought a lot of extra years of work and misery in your life that I never want you to have. Now, there are things we can't control. So I can't talk this way and not point out you might not avoid an NLE. There are divorces beyond control. There are sick children beyond control. There are illnesses for the dentist. You might get sick. There are acts of God. These are the non-controllables. There's nothing I can advise you on that except to be very well insured, which will come up in a minute. But big losses are hard to make up quickly for dentists. Again, there are plenty of entrepreneurs that go bankrupt. They start the next company. They hit it big. Entrepreneurs, when they go under, they don't worry that their life is finished. They just go on to the next big idea. As dentists, when we have big losses, we might never get it all back. We may never reach that level again. This doctor who lost $3.2 million when it was embezzled, he will never get that back based on his age. He just now wants to get enough to ever retire. So, and it's tragic. When I hear these stories, I get a pain in the pit of my stomach. And egotistically, and I try not to be egotistical, but I say to myself, God, I wish I could have advised this person earlier. I'm not that I don't give, I'm not a financial planner. So what I mean is, but there's certain common sense things where I've learned enough to say, check that very carefully. But you may, if you have an NLE, you may not be able to retire until late or help those around you. I meet so many dentists that they want to leave a certain amount to their kids. It's wonderful. You won't be able to do that if you have an NLE. Now, insurance is one of the ways you protect yourself. You know that, I know that. But I also meet a lot of dentists who have a problem and they're covered, but not the way they thought they were. I know a dentist right now had a fire in his house. He's been fighting with the insurance company. I won't name them, but a top insurance company. You all know who they are. And for 1 year, he's been battling to get full coverage. And he may get it, he may not. And he thought he was covered, and the insurance company is working to not fully cover. So what would negate your insurance coverage? It's like being threatened with malpractice or getting a letter from an attorney and not telling your malpractice carrier. Gary would know this better than I do, but in many cases that negates your insurance coverage. If your office burns down, are you covered? Well, you might be covered by insurance. Where are you going to go practice? So get 5 dentists together who all sign an agreement that if anybody's office floods or burns down, you can come into another office 2 days a week or 3 days a week for 6 months until you get back up and running. Labor lawsuits. Gary Pritchard on this panel has been not just incredible, but he has protected you if you listen to him. A lot of what Gary tells you will only happen to a minority of dentists, but if you happen to be the one, there's a 100% chance it happened to you. Litigation, malpractice, you want to avoid it as much as you can. You want to make sure you are covered. Personal possessions, is everything covered that you have? The next NLE I see a lot is embezzlement by your team. I'm not going to talk about that today, but by your advisors. And it's so common that it gets its own category. And most people don't tell you it happened to them. They're embarrassed. It's like art fraud. You bought a piece of art, you paid a lot of money. Later, you found out it was counterfeit. You don't run to tell everybody about that because you want to sell it anyway, which is kind of immoral. But at the same time, you don't want to look like the stupid person that got taken. So not everybody who gets, we hear about it at Levin Group a lot. You don't hear about it as much. But understand that if the institution you're invested in has, $100 or $200 billion in assets, you're going to be fine if anything happens. Are your accounts insured? You can only keep so much cash in accounts over that amount. You're not insured. And by the way, if that small bank has a problem, you might be insured, but it might take you 2 to 4 years or more to get your money back over time. So understand there's no chance of embezzlement if you're working with a big enough institution to protect yourself. Bad investments are another NLE. Crypto, you saw what happened to this one doctor who lost $500,000, which was her total life savings. We're all into the newest, hottest, whatever. AI is so hot right now. I'd like to take my portfolio and put it only in AI stocks. That's a fleeting thought I've had. I would never do it. I won't change my philosophy, but we all have these thoughts because somebody we meet is doing it. We've all met dentists who made it in crypto, according to them, or making it in AI, according to them. Remember, risk equals return. There's a dentist out there who's going to teach you how to buy real estate, and everything else is bad investment in the way it's promoted. Risk equals return. Now, the biggest long-term bad investment is not the one you think about. Your practice. No, your practice is not a bad investment. The bad investment is not growing the practice consistently. Your responsibility as a business owner to yourself, your family, your team is grow the practice. Overhead goes up, inflation goes up, staff costs go up. You don't have to grow it hugely, but you have to grow it steadily. And that depends on your systems, how well the practice is run, understanding the trends that are out there. Glidewell, one reason I love working with Glidewell is they're innovative. They will help you with implants. They will help you with sleep. They will help you with new types of procedures. They come out with new materials. What are the trends out there? If you want to know, ask Dr. Park. It depends on your profit and overhead. Most practices went up 10% in overhead in 2022 and 2023, but production was flat or up 1 or 2 or 3%. That's a 7% profit loss, even with production rising slightly. We have to make that up because profit loss, less income, less putting away in savings. Leadership, and depending on having your attitude of production growing every year. So as I finish up, I have a last section on should you sell your practice? Dentists are getting inundated by offers every day. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is get an expert to talk to, because you have no idea of the ramifications and implications of selling your practice. And the biggest sale right now is to a DSO. And the DSOs are not trying to take you, but there are a lot of factors to understand. Now, should you sell? Well, if you do sell part of your practice, then you get that money. And then if you can grow it, you have a smaller slice of a bigger pie, as they say. Number two, are you ready to take some money off the table? Well, I've got this practice. It's worth $1 million. I think I'd like to get $500,000. I'll get a partner. I'll sell part to a DSO sell into it. And I'll get $500,000 now that I can invest. But you've got tax ramification. Some of these are stock deals. What's the stock worth? Some are equity deals. Are you ever going to get that equity? Depends on. Right now, private equity firms are struggling because interest rates are up. Credit is down. A lot of articles this morning in the Wall Street Journal talking about private equity firms are beginning to struggle. They'll be back, but right now they're struggling. So you might not get the equity you expected 5 years later. Can you buy more equity down the road, etc.? Things will keep changing. DSOs will keep changing. The DSO you sell to today, is it a right fit for you? And the DSO you sell to today, will they be the same DSO tomorrow? Because here's what I've seen. The first many years, not a lot changes, and then things begin to change rapidly based on the economy, based on the business world, based on regulation, based on taxes. There's another factor. Your financial planners cannot tell you what taxes will be when it's time for you to think about retirement. So I end with this statement. This is my favorite slide and my best advice. What is the benefit of wealth accumulation? It's 4 things. 1, you never have a problem in life if you can write a check to make it go away. 2, you never have a problem in life if you can write a check to make it go away. 3, you never have a problem in life if you can write a check to make it go away. And 4, life is great. You will not have anything called a problem if you are able to write a check to make it go away. But to write that check, you've got to be in the right financial position. So you want to have the resources to invest in your practice. You want to have the resources to have a great lifestyle. You're not going to have 12 Ferraris in different colors and 3 houses on the Riviera, but you can have a great lifestyle. You want to have the resources to have an interesting life. Dentists are intelligent people. They're interested, whether it's travel, entertainment, reading, exposure. Interesting life is a pretty great life. You want resources for emergencies, and you're going to have them. We all do. And you may not cause it, but hopefully you'll have a long life. You will have emergencies. And you need resources to reach financial independence by the age you have targeted. Add that 20%, my view, to the financial plan. Because when you are wealthy, you have less to worry about, you have less stress, and by the way, you're happier. It's not true that money can't buy happiness. Well, it is true. Money can't buy happiness, but it can buy you a nice car to go looking for it. In review, if you're in the 99.999% of dentists, this I guarantee, I don't guarantee much, but I'll guarantee you, if you follow this and you make it work, it will work for you. Increase your practice income every year by increasing production, save the targeted amount fanatically, invest conservatively and diversified, and avoid NLEs, negative life events. Because as Mary Callahan Erdos said, 5% returns each year for 20 years isn't so bad. So I hope this will be helpful. I hope it's been useful. I hope it's at least been interesting. I want all of you to have the benefit of your hard work helping patients and your successful career.
Wonderful presentation, Roger. Wonderful, and there's so much to talk about. We had a bunch of questions here, but I've got a few questions of my own, and our panel has come back. MK, our CPA, Dr. Hochberg, Gary, our attorney. So we've got a good panel here to talk about some of these issues. I did get several questions about practice valuation, and I know that we're not really talking specific numbers here, but I think that since for most dentists that could be their biggest asset, that it is a good idea to have some rule of thumb. Is there some rule of thumb you have of what a practice is worth?
Well, let me say it this way. I'm gonna give you a rule of thumb, but first I'm gonna say I don't like rules of thumb. And MK may have an opinion on this that's really valuable, but I have done many valuations. And let me be clear, please do not call the Levin Group to do a valuation. We call MK, we do not do them anymore. But I've done many, so I have a little bit of experience. And the rule of thumb many years ago, as Dr. Park and Dr. Hochberg will remember, was 1 year's gross revenue. But rules of thumb are dangerous because there's a lot of variation. And here's my comment that's a little different than you might expect. The valuation is not the sale price. So understand that the value of your practice has nothing to do with your final sale price. For example, in the past, general practices sold for 60 to 70% of their valuation. Specialty practices sold for 40 to 50%. Today, we have something called EBITDA, and you can talk to your CPA about that. But think of EBITDA basically as your profit, and then you get a multiple. We'll pay you 5 times EBITDA or 8 times EBITDA. And the DSOs, until now, were paying higher levels of EBITDA. So we had this bubble where you could get 3 or 4 points more than what it was worth a few years earlier. Right now, it's slowing back down as private equity is getting a little more conservative. But valuations, just get someone who does them all the time to do it for you. It gives you a sense of the market value of your practice. But it doesn't mean someone will pay you that, and it doesn't mean someone won't pay you more.
But for planning purposes, I think that's a good suggestion.
Yes.
MK, you have any comments on practice valuation?
I do. And just like you said, I think it's something great to always have in your back pocket. If you've never had a valuation done on your practice, I would say have one done every 3-5 years. I don't know if you agree with that, Roger. But just going back to the question on different methods of valuation, it really depends. It depends on, what type of buyer you're looking for. And I know my famous answer of it depends, but it could, the two that I've seen within our team that when we do valuations is one, it can depend on the cash flow. So if you have a really positive cash flow practice, that's going to be usually the method that we use that's going to get a higher result. Or it can go back to what your actual collections are. So a percentage of collections. And then, obviously as Dr. Park said, EBITDA is always good to know. So that's one thing my clients, we always talk about is EBITDA when we go over financials. What is that number? That's the starting point.
Yeah. And MK, I'll add one thing that no one would, since I'm not a CPA, I can talk about this, but if you happen to have certain expenses in your practice that might not be totally dedicated to the practice, understand that's going to lower your valuation. So when you're 5 years from selling, clean that up because the lower the expenses, the higher the valuation is going to be. So where you might have benefited tax-wise on one hand, you're going to pay for it on the other if you don't clean that up.
And if you have a really
Dr. Hochberg,
good CPA, sorry, Dr. Park. No, I was going to say, if you have a really good dental CPA, we structure our P&Ls to pull that information out at the bottom. So your EBITDA always shows the true value before we get to those discretionary type items.
So you add the country club dues back into the practice practice numbers, right? Got it. I mean, Dr. Hochberg, it's a far cry from our early years when everybody talked about, well, the practice net and the practice gross, and a lot of times practices were valued off of the gross, which is not a really instructive number since gross can be whittled down quite a bit.
Yeah, no, it isn't. But I still think that 1 year rule of thumb is an interesting place to go as a big picture observation, because the EBITDA factors to me are arbitrary. They float up and down. And if you look at the 1 year rule of thumb, you look at the EBITDA values, they're probably reasonably close depending on who's looking at it. So it's not that great. But Roger gave in 30 minutes something that I should have taken when I was 32 years old. Thank you for coming around 30 years too late, okay? But
but Roger didn't know all that stuff 32 years ago. It's taken him all these years of working with thousands of practices to figure all this out. And now, unfortunately, it's too late for us, David, but not too late for most of you folks out there.
Right. And let me finish my sentence just for a second, Neil, on that line. Wealth accumulation, doing everything what Roger says, getting your house in order with your practice, but there's something, it's lost profession. You just don't want to screw it up. And you need to start with a CPA. And today we have CPAs that are dentist specialized. It's not just a CPA. When I started and throughout my career, I happened to utilize the services of Aprio. But before that, they were a small accounting firm here in Atlanta. And Ricky was my guy for 30 years. And I went to him and I said, hey, I need a banker. CPA, he's connected. I got the banker. And then I needed a financial planner. CPA got me the financial planner. So they are professionals that you need to be affiliated with to prevent you from blowing it. And Roger talked about that a little bit. And I'm not a financial planner. I'm done picking stocks, but you can make it, but you can lose it. So you want to prevent it on the bottom end. 5 years ago or 8 years ago, when HIPAA became a thing and you wanted to be HIPAA compliant, and if you weren't, you had penalties that were $50,000 or $100,000. I asked my insurance people, you got insurance for this? The answer was yes. I took out insurance policy. So if I ever screw up with HIPAA, I got insurance. Same thing for fiber insurance. Protecting me on that end is adding money to anything that's wealth management. And there are two other ones I want to add. One was the attorney. You need an attorney. You're not going to sue people, but you have a contract. It could be your a real estate. You're renewing your lease. What the heck do I know about renewing a lease? I'm in a 30-story structure. I'm a little guy in a big, huge building. I want to walk into the room with people that look much more competent than the implant guy that I am. So the attorney helped a lot. And a real estate agent, not everybody owns the building where they practice. You're negotiating a lease. There's leasehold improvements, allowances. And the other one on the list is a practice management consultant, just like Roger, and you can prevent bad things from happening. Or what was that, Roger? Negative life experiences.
Negative life events.
David, I think you bring up a really good point that you put together your own panel of experts that are going to guide you through it. And for you folks that don't know Dr. Hochberg, I mean, he's the living embodiment of the advice that Roger has given. That always growing his practice, understanding that his practice was his real source of wealth, investing in his practice, growing his practice, and working with a bunch of great professionals to make sure that he accumulates money and hangs on to it. Gary, I'd love to get your input as an attorney with some of the expertise that dentists can use attorneys for to make sure that they stay out of trouble.
Yeah, no. So I think Dr. Hochberg just touched on something with the lease. For some of these can be really complicated. I mean, this stuff, if you are reading a contract and you are not understanding every single word that's in that contract, that's the time to make sure that you get somebody to help you out. And on the big stuff, for sure, you've got to cover yourself and make sure you get a competent legal representation.
Okay, I want to start going after some of these many questions that are staring at me here. And Roger, I'm going to ask you. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about the trends in the percentages of solo practitioners and the ones that are then moving over to DSOs versus group versus going solo? Is the practice, does it look a lot different than it did 10, 15 years ago?
It does. We're down to 37% solo practice. So for years, it was very stable at around 65 to 70%. Now, I would say the majority of private practices today are 2 to 3 doctors. That's the sweet spot. We see some with 5 or 6. We see the 37% that have 1. And DSOs are growing. Now, the problem is we don't know the definition of DSO. So is that 50 or more practices? Is that 30 or more? There's definitely a trend toward DSO. It's slowing down just a little bit with the current interest rates and the current borrowing rates. But they're here, they're staying. We have not seen DSOs go under yet. We know there's some that are struggling out there, but we don't know, the details are not available. So I think we're going to see a slow growth in DSO employment for dentists. It's a choice, but make the choice consciously. I get calls from people. I call it not knowing the questions to ask, and that's okay. But I'll get a call from a dentist that I've never met. I got an offer. Do you think I should sell my practice? And they have no real information other than the offer. Well, a lot of those offers are highball prices to get you talking to a broker to try to sell your practice. Brokers want to sell. So again, when you get approached by somebody, that's where David's concept of surrounding yourself with a team of experts comes in. And David, the wealthiest dentists I've seen, since we're talking about wealth today, surround themselves with experts. I mean, they got a whole group. When something comes to you, don't try to figure it out. Call the right expert, give it to them, and ask them what they think or what they think you should do. David, you mentioned leases. Gary, I would never negotiate my own lease. You get an attorney to do that for you because they do it better and they do it smarter. And then you don't have to take the time to do it and waste time doing that. So that's the trend. It's toward more group practice. And the trend is toward DSO, but it's moving at a slower, steady pace versus pre-pandemic.
Got it. Got it. What would you say to a dentist that's maybe in his or her 50s and is a little bit behind their goals as far as wealth accumulation? Are there things we can do, let's say in our 50s, so that we don't have to practice till we're 75?
Well, there are, but as you asked the question, I got a chill down my back, and I'll tell you why. Because that's when you start swinging for the fences. I've seen this so many times. I'm 60 years old. I don't have enough savings, so I'm going to go off on some wild investment to try to really make it big. And by the way, if you want to take big risk and find wild investments, there's somebody today that will be happy to sell them to you. And some of them work out, but again, that's the exception, and you're probably not the exception. So yes, there are things you can do, and you want to work with your financial plan, but they take a little time. You can convert your retirement plan into a Roth IRA, for example. I don't want to give specific advice, but if you convert your retirement plan into a Roth, you got to pay your taxes on it, but then it grows tax-free and comes out tax-free. But the truth is, there aren't that many magical, incredible, I'm 55 and I need a few more $1 million tomorrow opportunities out there. Most of it's going to be steady gains. The good news is right now interest rates are good. You can do nicely with dividend stocks, with treasuries, but you're not getting 20%, you're getting 4 or 5%, which is better than it was with the same strategies 6 years ago. But again, risk equals return. If you've got to swing big, you could also get hurt.
Yeah, I did want to jump in here, and certainly you're right about relying on experts. But, very early in my career, when I put my first few dollars together, I went to one of the really hot financial planners or well-known, well-established financial planners in town, and he lost every single dollar for me, putting it in limited partnerships that went under. And so what I'm saying is that yes, use experts, but become an expert yourself. There's nobody that is as deeply motivated for your success in investing as you are yourself.
Right.
And so do everything you can to become educated about investments, about the stock market, about index funds versus stock picking, things like that, because you need to keep a close eye on these experts that you hire. That there are differences of opinion that can make a big difference in your ability to accumulate wealth over a 40-year period.
Yeah, that's a brilliant thought. And along with that, if my advice, be diversified. No matter how good something looks, don't put more than a certain percentage of your assets into it. If you're going to get hurt small. That's a lot better.
Right. And sell those stocks sometimes. Tesla's not going to keep growing forever. Sell it at 360 like I did. Don't hold it till it's till it goes all the way down. I've got a question here about real estate. First of all, is it a good idea to own the real estate that your practice is inside of?
Well, the
MK,
answer
maybe
can
that's
be
a question for you.
I'm happy to answer that. I'm smiling because I'm like, absolutely. Yes, we encourage that 100%, especially when you get the chance to own the real estate and purchase the real estate. It goes back to what Roger just said of being diversified, because when and if you sell one day, I advise to hold on to that real estate. I know that was a question, that one part of that question is to hold on to it, because that is a retirement strategy for you. You get to continue collecting the rental income and increasing the rental income every single year, and really having another set of cash flow coming in. So
sell your practice, keep the building, right? Sell your practice, keep the building.
My clients that have done that, they've held on to the real estate.
Okay. But there are other people that say, don't get those two decisions mixed up. So, for example, if you own the building, you're unlikely to move your practice. Dr. Hochberg is renting, and if he sees that his building is really not a good location for its practice anymore, he can, the next time that lease is up, he could just go ahead and change. There are people that say don't confuse those two decisions: practice location and real estate ownership. How do you respond to that?
Me, Dr.
Sure.
Park? Yeah, I mean, it all just goes back to, and I attribute this all back to personal financial goals. What are your personal goals, and where you want to be in X amount of years, going back to Roger's whole theme of gaining that financial independence. So yes, I do have the practices that rent and know that they get that option to move whenever the lease ends, it's not working for them. But then the ones that it kind of goes into, if you have to move locations, there's a lot that goes into that, and all the improvements and equipment and all the other things that go into it. So you have to weigh all the options and the factors that go into those big decisions. And going back to, you work with your team. You don't make that decision by yourself. You gather your team around you and you talk through all the options and scenarios and the cost, benefit, and the cash flow.
And one caveat to add is that I've seen is building too big a building, and you're going to rent out 80% of it, and you don't get the renters. The next thing you know, you're in financial trouble. So every piece of advice we've given, MK and everybody, comes with caveats as well to be careful about. And that's where your experts come in.
Well, speaking of experts, I really appreciate Gary, MK, Roger, and David. You folks have been incredibly helpful. I think, Roger always talks about his sincere interest to help dentists be successful, and I think you folks here today have really contributed to that. I think there's been some great advice, and Roger, I'm just so amazed at what you've put together. It's an incredible company, incredible group of advisors that can help dentists in so many different ways. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to you folks out there who have been watching this webinar for 4 years. I am truly honored by the fact that you take the time to spend with us, and we're going to keep trying to make it worthwhile for you.